Hello, I'm so glad you are with us today. Today's story is about a young lady that was betrayed by her boyfriend and best friend in the worst way. I have a question for you. If you found your love in bed with someone, would you be able to walk away without confronting them? Yes or no? Leave a comment below. Avery Landon stood in front of the mirror, the morning light slicing through the curtains behind her. She stared at her reflection, studying the tired eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. The betrayal still burned her skin like an open scar. A full year had passed, but forgetting was impossible. She remembered the moment like it had just happened, every detail sharp, her hand on the doorknob, the faint laughter coming from inside. She hadn't suspected a thing. Why would she? It was her home, her bed, her life. And there they were. Quinn Hampton, the man she had loved for 2 years, tangled in the sheets with Harper, her best friend, her closest confidant since college. Avery didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen, watching. Something inside her fractured that day. She'd walked out without a word, driven until the gas tank hit empty, and sat in the car in silence for what felt like hours. The pain wasn't loud. It was quiet and precise, like glass splinters under her skin. Even now, she touched that day like a bruise, flinching when she thought about it too long. Trust wasn't something she handed out easily before. Now it was behind lock and key, buried beneath steel walls and cold calculation. People told her to let it go, to move on. But moving on felt like pretending it hadn't happened, and she refused to give them that. Avery ran her fingers through her hair and took a long breath. She had survived it. That counted for something. And while the past haunted her, it no longer held her hostage. She turned away from the mirror, grabbed her keys, and walked out the door. Today she had her own plans, and none of them included ghosts. Avery redirected her life. She left behind the city, the shared apartment with too many memories, and the pressure to bounce back. Instead, she answered an ad for a in-home childcare position 2 towns over. The posting was simple. Single father, 1 child, full-time care, room and board included. It didn't promise excitement, but that was exactly the point. Avery didn't want excitement. She wanted quiet. Purpose. At the interview, Mr. Caldwell met her at the front door of a weathered but warm farmhouse. He was in his early 40s, neatly dressed, with a tired look that mirrored her own. He led her through a modest kitchen and into a living room where framed photos lined the mantel. His son, Miles, peeked at her from the staircase before retreating like a shadow. They sat across from each other. No small talk, no formalities. Just 2 people carrying grief like extra bones under their skin. "I've looked at your resume," Mr. Caldwell said. "You're overqualified for this. You've worked in educational development, have a degree in psychology. So why this?" Avery didn't lie. She told him about Quinn, about Harper, about the apartment she couldn't stand to be in anymore. She told him about her family, how they kept offering advice instead of listening, how they looked at her like she was broken glass they didn't know how to pick up. "I need to be needed," she said finally, "by someone who actually wants me there. And I need space from everyone who keeps telling me to just move on." There was a long pause, but he didn't seem surprised. Instead, he nodded slowly. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. "Complications from surgery. Everyone thought I should start dating again after a year. Get back out there, like grief has an expiration date." Avery's throat tightened. "I know what that's like." He looked up at her then, really looked. Not through her or past her, but directly into the quiet ache behind her words. "I don't want a therapist," he said. "Or a miracle worker. I just need someone good with Miles. He hasn't really spoken to anyone outside school. Doesn't trust people easily. That makes 2 of us," she said. A small smile tugged at his mouth. It was the first sign of ease either of them had shown since she walked in. "You'd have your own room, weekends mostly free. He's 8, smart, stubborn, quiet, like his dad. I'd like to meet him properly," Avery said, "if he's okay with that." "He's shy," Mr. Caldwell said. "It will take time for him to warm up to you've been healing, but he'll come around. Miles needs someone that is patient with him." She started the job the next week. It wasn't glamorous. Early mornings, school drop-offs, trying to cook meals. Miles wouldn't push around with a fork, but it was steady, honest, and the house, with all its creaks and silences, began to feel more like a pause than an ending. For the first time in a long time, Avery didn't feel lost. She felt needed, and slowly, she began to need something back. After a couple of weeks, Avery noticed the shift. It wasn't dramatic. Miles didn't suddenly run into her arms or chatter over dinner, but something subtle began to change. He started leaving his sketchbook on the kitchen table when he was done drawing. Sometimes he'd slide it across to her silently, eyes flicking up just for a second before darting away. At first, she didn't know what to make of it, but the pages told her everything he wouldn't say. There were crayon rockets and trees with crooked branches, a figure that looked a lot like her holding a red balloon. Another page showed a T-Rex with a crown, his favorite toy which she had found tucked under his pillow one night. From his drawings, Avery learned what made him feel safe. He liked macaroni and cheese, specifically the spiraled kind. He hated peas. His favorite game was hide and seek, especially when he could sneak into places he wasn't supposed to be. He adored dinosaurs, space, and pretending to be a superhero with a flashlight as his power beam. He could talk. She knew that. He just didn't, at least not with her. But this was his language, and Avery respected it. She never forced conversation. She responded through action, packing his favorite snacks, joining in his silent games, setting out fresh paper and crayons without saying a word. One evening, as she was wiping down the counters, Nolan leaned against the doorway watching her. "He's drawing more," he said, "and he's letting you see it. That's not nothing." Avery looked up, surprised by the softness in his voice. "He's warming up to you," Nolan said. "That takes time with him, but I see it." Avery didn't say anything. Sel just nodded once, because she saw it too. And it meant everything. One afternoon, Nolan stepped into the kitchen, adjusting the collar of his jacket, his keys in hand. "I need to head into the city for a meeting," he said. "It's going to run late, so I probably won't be back until after Miles is asleep." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I already talked to him, but bedtime might be a little rough. He doesn't love changes in the routine." Avery nodded, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "If he needs you, I'll give you a call. Otherwise, we'll be okay." Nolan gave her a grateful look and left with a quick goodbye. That evening, just after dinner, the wind picked up outside, howling through the trees like something alive. Clouds smothered the last light of day, and within minutes, a sudden gust knocked out the power. The house went dark. A loud crack echoed outside, and then came the unmistakable thud of a tree branch hitting the roof. Avery's heart skipped. Before she could even grab a flashlight, she heard fast footsteps down the hallway. Miles appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. He looked at her, wanting to leap into her arms but pausing, unsure. Caught between fear and uncertainty. Avery gave him a soft smile and crouched down. "Hey, I've got an idea," she said gently. "You want to help me build the biggest, comfiest blanket fort this house has ever seen?" Miles blinked, then slowly nodded. She handed him a flashlight and gathered pillows, blankets, and chairs. Together, they built a glowing hideout in the living room, lit with battery-powered lanterns and the occasional giggle from Miles when their fort sagged and had to be rebuilt. Inside, they lay on their stomachs and made shadow puppets against the tent walls. Avery showed him how to shape a dog, a bunny, and even a dinosaur. When his hands got tired, she taught him a few words in sign language: light, safe, friend. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy. He curled up beside her, head resting against her arm. Avery brushed a hand gently through his hair and started to low and slow, just a lullaby she remembered from her own childhood. She stayed like that until his breathing evened out and he was fast asleep. For the first time, Miles had chosen her, not with words, but with trust. And Avery didn't take that lightly. Nolan didn't make it home until just after sunrise. The sky outside was soft and gray. The wind finally calmed. He stepped quietly through the front door, expecting a quiet house and two people still asleep. Instead, he found the kitchen filled with the warm scent of pancakes and soft laughter. Avery stood at the counter, flipping golden rounds in a skillet, while Miles, standing on a chair, stirred batter in a big mixing bowl with careful focus. Nolan paused in the doorway, stunned. Not because they were making breakfast, but because of the boy in front of him. Miles looked up, eyes lighting up the moment he saw his dad. He jumped down from the chair, batter-speckled spoon still in hand. "Hi, Dad, I missed you." Nolan knelt to catch him in a hug, instinctively pulling the spoon away before it could leave a trail on his shirt. "Hey, son, I missed you too." Miles bounced with excitement. The power went out last night, and Avery and I made a tent fort in the living room. We did shadow puppets, and she showed me sign language, and she hummed a song until I fell asleep in her arms. Nolan raised his eyebrows slightly, caught off guard by how much his son had to say, and how easily he said it. But he didn't show it. He smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Sounds like you had a pretty awesome night." Miles nodded proudly, then tilted his head. "How many pancakes do you want?" Nolan glanced up at Avery, who stood by the stove, trying to hide a small smile. "Two's good," he said, ruffling Miles's hair. As his son turned to get plates, Nolan met Avery's eyes across the kitchen and mouthed, "Thank you." Avery gave a quiet nod back. She didn't need the words, because what passed between them wasn't just gratitude. It was recognition of a connection forming, trust taking root, and a little boy who had finally let someone in. And for the first time in a long time, Nolan felt like something in the house was changing. Not all at once, but quietly and in the right direction. Later that day after school, Avery surprised Miles with a trip to the local ice cream shop. He'd gotten an A on his math test, a big win considering how much he'd struggled with word problems just a few weeks ago. Miles chose chocolate with sprinkles, grinning as he climbed into the booth with his cone. Avery got a small vanilla and let him do most of the talking. He chattered about school, how he'd solved a tricky problem in class, and how he wanted to show his daddy the test when they got home. Few minutes in, a woman approached their table, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. "Is that Miles Caldwell?" she asked with a smile, surprised. Miles froze mid-lick, but Avery looked up calmly. "Yes," Avery said. "You know him?" The woman's smile widened in that tight, too curious way. "I'm Lorene. I was good friends with Nolan's wife. We used to volunteer together at the library." She looked down at Miles, then back at Avery. "And you are?" "Avery. I help care for Miles." "Oh," Lorene said, sitting down across from them without waiting for an invitation. "A nanny, then?" "Something like that," Avery replied, keeping her tone polite but firm. Lorene kept her eyes sharp, scanning every glance and smile between the two. "He seems very comfortable with you," she said, as Miles leaned against Avery, licking his cone and humming to himself. Avery smiled faintly. "He's a great kid." Lorene nodded slowly, then stood, patting Miles on the head. "It was so nice running into you. I'll let Nolan's family know how well he's doing." The moment she walked out, Lorene was already pulling out her phone, dialing quickly. By the time Avery and Miles had left the shop, Nolan's mother had already been told, "Something's going on." By the time Avery and Miles walked through the front door, the tail end of a tense conversation echoed from Nolan's office. "No, we're fine. You don't need to come," Nolan said firmly. "Miles is doing great. We'll see you during the holidays. Take care." He hung up, just as they stepped into the hallway. His expression was tight for half a second before he turned around, forcing a calm smile. "Hey, Dad," Miles called, running up with his backpack. "Look at my math paper. I got an A. We went out for ice cream." Nolan crouched and gave him a high five. "That's awesome, son. Great job." Miles grinned and took off toward his room, eager to tape the test on his wall. Avery lingered near the kitchen, watching Nolan with a curious look. "What's wrong?" she asked. Nolan let out a slow breath. "My mother. She wants to come for a visit." "Okay, and?" "She heard about you. From Lorene, apparently. So now she's convinced she needs to check in and make sure everything's okay." Avery crossed her arms. "Why is that a problem?" "I told her I'd call if I ever felt overwhelmed," Nolan said. "But I didn't hire you because I was falling apart. I needed someone consistent, someone I could trust with Miles while I work. My mom means well, but she's a force of nature. Once she's in, she doesn't know how to stop. She'll take over everything." Avery raised an eyebrow. "So, should I start packing?" Nolan looked at her, almost alarmed. "No, please don't leave us here alone with her. Avery burst out laughing, caught off guard by the seriousness in his voice. Nolan smiled, finally relaxing a little. "All right," she said. "I'll stay. But if she brings fruitcake, I'm out." That Saturday morning started like most others, quiet and easy. Nolan, Avery, and Miles sat around the kitchen table eating pancakes again, a new tradition that had taken root without much discussion. Miles was mid-laugh, syrup on his cheek, when the front door creaked open. Avery looked toward the sound, confused. Nolan didn't move. Miles froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Then she appeared. Susie Caldwell walked into the kitchen like she owned the house. Her posture was rigid, her eyes sharp, and her lips pursed in a way that said this wasn't a social call. She didn't knock. She didn't say good morning. She just walked in, assessing the scene as if she were looking at an open house, not her son's kitchen. "Mother," Nolan said slowly, rising from his chair, his tone carefully neutral. "You didn't say you were coming." Susie offered him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Surprises are the best way to see how things really are. Miles slid off his chair and walked to her. She knelt to hug him, smoothing his hair. He hugged her back, but his body was stiff. He didn't speak. Avery noticed that right away. It was the same way he used to look at her when they first met, guarded, uncertain. Avery stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Avery. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Caldwell." Susie barely glanced at her. Was all she offered in return, as if Avery were part of the furniture. The chill in the room was immediate. Nolan saw it too. "Mom," he said tightly, "can I speak with you in my office?" Susie blinked, surprised by his tone, but followed him without protest. They were gone for nearly 15 minutes. When they returned, Susie's demeanor had shifted entirely. "Well," she said with exaggerated brightness, "I'm so glad Avery is here to assist with Miles. What a big help you must be, dear." Avery smiled politely, but her eyes flicked to Nolan, who gave her a look that said, "I know. I'm sorry." Miles stayed quiet, eyes down, pushing his pancake around on the plate. Avery sat back down beside him, gently nudging his shoulder. "You okay?" He nodded, then slid his hand under the table to squeeze hers. It was all the answer she needed. After breakfast, Nolan stood and grabbed his keys. "We're heading to the community center," he said casually. "They're working on the garden this morning, and we volunteered to help out." Susie raised an eyebrow. "We?" "Yes," Nolan replied, picking up a water bottle. "Me, Miles, and Avery." Susie's eyes shifted toward Avery, her expression unreadable. "Oh, is Avery going too?" Avery nodded with a warm smile. "I was the one who invited them, actually. The garden's a great project, and I thought Miles would enjoy it." Susie offered a smile laced with condescension. "Yes, of course. You're so sweet." Nolan didn't even hide his irritation this time. He shot his mother a hard look. "We'll be back later." He placed a hand gently on Miles's shoulder. "Let's go, bud." The community center garden was buzzing with volunteers when they arrived. Miles was quiet at first, sticking close to Avery, but once he saw the rows of seedlings and felt the soil between his fingers, he lit up. A kind older volunteer showed him how to plant tomatoes in tidy rows, then move on to cucumbers and peppers. He was focused, careful, and completely at ease. "Can we grow vegetables at home?" he asked Avery, brushing dirt from his hands. She smiled. "Sure we can. You just need the right planter and some space in the yard." Nolan, standing nearby, had already heard him. "Let's make it happen," he said, tossing his gloves into a bin. On the way home, they stopped at the hardware store. Nolan picked out a raised planter, bags of soil, and seed packets for every vegetable Miles had touched that day. Back at the house, the three of them worked together in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty, laughter carrying on the breeze. It was simple, peaceful, something like family. And that's exactly what Susie saw when she looked out the window. She stepped onto the back porch, arms crossed, watching them. They were too comfortable, too connected. Miles was glowing around Avery, and Nolan, he looked content in a way she hadn't seen in years. Her mouth tightened. Avery wasn't just a caregiver. She was becoming something more. And Susie Caldwell never liked surprises she couldn't control. She stood silently for a moment longer, then turned back inside, already thinking about what to do next. That evening, after Avery had gently tucked Miles into bed and turned off the light in his room, she came downstairs to find Susie waiting in the living room, perched stiffly on the edge of the couch with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The tension in the room was immediate. "Avery," Susie said, her voice cool but clipped, "can I ask you something?" Avery hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, sensing where this was going. "Sure. What exactly do you and my son do once Miles is asleep?" Avery blinked, caught completely off guard. "Excuse me, what do you mean?" "You seem very comfortable here," Susie said, eyes narrowed. "With both of my boys." Avery stared at her for a moment, then slowly crossed her arms. "Are you implying that Nolan and I are in a relationship?" Susie's expression was unreadable. "I'm saying it looks that way. And people are starting to talk. It's inappropriate." Avery's voice dropped, steady but firm. "I'm here for Miles. That's my job. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Nolan." "I think you're taking advantage of them," Susie said coldly. "Why else would someone like you be here?" Avery's jaw tightened. "Someone like me?" "You know what I mean," Susie replied. "A young black woman, overly familiar, living in a single father's home. Either an opportunist or something worse." Avery took a step forward. "So what is it, Susie? Is it that I'm a black, educated woman? Or are you calling me a gold digger?" Susie didn't blink. Either description would work. Before Avery could respond, a voice exploded from the doorway. "Stop. Stop it now, Mother." Nolan stood there, his face pale with fury, his hands clenched at his sides. Susie turned toward him, startled. "Nolan?" "No," he said sharply. "There is nothing going on between Avery and me. But if there was, it would be none of your damn business. Nolan, you don't get to come into my house and speak to her that way. Avery is a guest here. More than that, she's someone Miles trusts, someone I trust, and you will apologize." "I will not," Susie snapped. "I'm your mother. I'm looking out for you and Miles." "No," Nolan said. "What you're doing is projecting your fear and prejudice onto someone who has done nothing but care for my son and bring peace back into this house." Susie's voice trembled slightly. "You would kick me out?" "Yes," Nolan said without hesitation. "It's taken me years to get Miles to laugh again, to trust someone, to open up, and I will not let you destroy that with your suspicion and cruelty." Susie's face crumbled just slightly, her pride colliding with the shock of his words. "But Nolan, you've never spoken to me like this before. Look at what she's doing to us." "No," he cut in, voice iron. "Look at what you're doing. You crossed a line, and now you need to decide. Apologize or pack your things." The room went silent. Even the old floorboards seemed to hold their breath. After a long pause, Susie drew herself up stiffly. "I'll leave in the morning," she said, her voice thin. She walked past them, head high, but her steps faltered as she reached the stairs. Nolan looked at Avery, guilt flickering behind his eyes. "I'm so sorry." Avery, still steady, gave him a small nod. "I didn't do anything wrong." "No," Nolan said quietly. "You didn't, and I'm done letting anyone treat you like you did." The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. A kind of stillness hung in the air. Susie moved with stiff purpose, her overnight bag in one hand, her lips drawn tight. She barely made eye contact with anyone. She found Miles in the living room, playing with his dinosaur figures on the rug. She bent down, hugged him gently. He hugged her back but said nothing. "Goodbye, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing his hair back. Miles gave her a small wave as she walked out the door. He followed her with his eyes, standing at the window and watching as she got into her car and drove off. The moment the car disappeared around the bend, he turned to his father. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I like when Grandma calls," Miles said, "but I hate when she visits. Is that wrong?" Nolan exhaled slowly, kneeling beside him. "No, son, I feel that way too. She can be a lot. She likes to control things, and that doesn't always feel good." Miles nodded thoughtfully, then quietly padded into the kitchen, as if that settled something in his young mind. Avery was already at the counter pouring orange juice. "You all right?" she asked, eyes flicking up to Nolan. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, I am. It's funny, she keeps telling me I should move on, but only if it's with someone she approves of, like I need to check a list." "Was your wife her standard?" Avery asked, arching a brow. Nolan let out a laugh. "Not even close." Avery smirked. So I guess your mom thought she had a second chance to find the right woman for you, and I was in the way. Nolan looked at her, a slow grin forming. Well, she's not wrong. Avery blinked. What do you mean? There's something here, he said simply. Between the three of us, we're becoming a family. It's happening slowly, yeah, but it's real, and I want to see where it goes. Avery felt warmth rise up her neck, color blooming on her cheeks. You think so? I do, Nolan said. When Miles has news, good or bad, you're the first person he tells. Same with me. We look for you. You're the one we want to share things with every day. Avery looked down, biting back a smile. Nolan stepped closer, voice soft. Can I ask you something? Sure. How did you feel that morning last month when Miles and I went on that hike and you woke up to an empty house? Avery laughed lightly, her voice slightly unsteady. It was hard. I felt weirdly lonely. Like something was missing. I just couldn't wait for you two to come back. Nolan chuckled. Yeah, I figured. You cooked enough food for half the town. Avery rolled her eyes, laughing. Okay, maybe I overdid it. He grinned. You're part of this, Avery. Not just because we need you, but because we want you here. She met his eyes, the air between them charged with something new and unspoken. And for the first time, it didn't scare her. 2 months had passed since Susie Caldwell had packed her things and walked out the front door. The house had settled into a rhythm in her absence, calmer, lighter. Miles was thriving, Nolan seemed more at ease, and Avery had found something that felt dangerously close to home. So when a knock came at the door one quiet Saturday afternoon, Avery wasn't expecting to find Susie standing on the porch. Her posture was stiff, as always, but her expression held something different this time. Not judgment, not control. Something closer to humility. Avery, Susie said, her voice steady. Is my son home? Avery blinked, surprised. Yes, come in. She stepped aside and Susie entered, glancing briefly around the familiar living room. Before Avery could call for Nolan, he was already appearing from the hallway, eyes narrowing when he saw who was there. Mother, he said, cautious. We haven't heard from you in 2 months. What are you doing here? Susie took a deep breath. I came to apologize to both of you. That stopped Nolan in his tracks. I got a call from Miles the other day, she continued. He talked to me for 15 minutes straight. He told me about school, the garden, and his new art project. He was excited, happy. He's never been on the phone with me longer than 3 minutes. She turned to Avery, her voice softening. And I know that has everything to do with you. Avery said nothing, her expression unreadable. I've had time to think, Susie went on. I know I've had prejudiced ways. I've been controlling, dismissive. And I see now how wrong I was. I want to work on that, if you'll let me. She paused, then looked between them. And I know you two aren't in a relationship. This town's too small. People talk. I let that cloud my judgment. Avery crossed her arms, studying her. You said a lot of hurtful things. I did, Susie admitted. And I'm not asking you to forget them. Just maybe give me a chance to show I can be better. Nolan glanced at Avery, then back at his mother. Well, he said slowly, this is a start. And for the first time, Susie didn't argue. Nolan gave a small, almost sheepish smile. Well, Mom, you are completely wrong. Avery raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? He turned to her, eyes steady, voice low. Avery, will you go out with me tonight on a real date? For a moment, Avery just stood there, stunned, her mouth falling open in disbelief. Susie, watching from the side, gave a dramatic sigh. Darling, close your mouth before flies make it their home. Laughter erupted in the room. Avery's sharp and sudden, Nolan's low and relieved. Even Susie cracked a smile, and it was the first time it felt genuine. Avery blinked, still catching up. That's something my mom would say, she muttered, shaking her head. Just then, Miles came skidding around the corner, having caught the tail end of the moment. Say yes, he shouted, bouncing up and down like a pinball. Avery looked at Nolan, then at Miles, then back at Nolan. She took a slow breath. Her heart was thudding in her chest, but not in a way that made her nervous. Just full. Full of everything this strange, unexpected life had brought her. Yes, she said finally, smiling. I'll go out with you. Miles whooped like someone had just scored the winning goal in a soccer game. Nolan laughed, and even Susie nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. Well, Susie said, dusting off her hands. I guess I'll keep my opinions to myself. For now. Avery looked at her and grinned. That's all we ask. And in that moment, the room felt lighter. Like something new had started. Not just a date, not just a shift, but something that could actually last. After Nolan and Avery left the house, Nolan in a crisp button-down, Avery in a soft dress and a shy smile, Susie found herself alone with Miles for the first time in weeks. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. They sat at the kitchen table, a board game half set up between them, though neither of them seemed eager to play. Susie folded her hands, choosing her words carefully. Miles, she said softly, can I ask you something? He looked up from arranging his game pieces, curious but calm. Okay. What do you really think about Avery? Miles tilted his head, as if surprised by the question. I love her. Susie blinked. You do? He nodded, expression serious. Yeah. Why? She asked gently. Miles didn't even hesitate, because she never treated me like I was broken or different. She never made me talk when I didn't want to. She didn't try to fix me. She just let me be me. Susie felt a tightness in her chest she hadn't expected. And when I got scared that night, the lights went out, Miles continued. She hummed and rocked me like Mom used to. We talk about Mom a lot. Susie swallowed. You do? Miles nodded again. Avery said Mom will always be with me, even if she's not here. She said I can talk to her anytime I want, that she's listening, just not talking back. Just like I was doing before. Something pricked at Susie's heart. A slow, aching pressure she didn't quite know how to name. Miles looked down at his hands. Someday, I hope Avery can be my mom too. Susie's breath caught. Does Avery know that? He shook his head. No, it's my dream, just mine for now. Susie reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. For the first time in a long while, she didn't have anything to say. No advice, no corrections, just the quiet weight of understanding. And maybe, finally, acceptance. Susie stayed for the rest of the week. To everyone's surprise, she genuinely tried. Not just with Nolan and Miles, but with Avery too. She asked thoughtful questions, helped in the kitchen, and even joined Avery and Miles in the garden. Digging her manicured nails into the soil without complaint. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. The morning she was set to leave, Susie found Avery alone on the back porch, sipping coffee in the early sun. She stepped out quietly, a travel bag slung over her shoulder. Avery, she said, her voice softer than usual. Avery looked up, a little wary, but nodded. Hello? Susie paused beside her, then reached out and lightly touched her arm. I just wanted to say thank you for taking care of my boys. Avery smiled faintly. It's not a job, they take care of me too. I know, Susie said. She looked out over the yard where Miles had planted his vegetables with Avery. If things between you and Nolan are heading somewhere more serious, I want you to know, you have my blessing. Avery blinked, surprised. That's kind of you. Susie nodded, her voice catching just a little. They deserve happiness, both of them. After everything they've lost, I've realized what matters most is that they feel safe and loved. And with you, they do. She gave Avery's arm a gentle squeeze, then turned and walked back inside. Later that afternoon, after Susie had gone, Nolan found Avery in the living room, sorting through Miles's schoolwork. What did she say? He asked, curious. Avery grinned. She said she wants an invitation to our wedding. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? And maybe to help with the planning, Avery added, laughing. Nolan leaned down and gave her a kiss, slow and certain. From the other end of the room, Miles groaned dramatically and covered his face with both hands. Ugh, kissing. Yuck. They both burst out laughing. But Avery glanced at Nolan and knew, deep down, this wasn't just the happy ending, it was the beginning. The seasons shifted, and so did their lives. What started as a job, a way for Avery to escape the pain of her past, had quietly transformed into a home, a real one. Not built with walls and rooms, but with trust, healing, and the small, everyday acts of choosing each other. Nolan no longer walked around with a guarded heart. He smiled more. He laughed more. He reached for Avery's hand without thinking. And Miles, once quiet and withdrawn, now woke up early to water his garden and ask Avery impossible questions about the stars, dinosaurs, and whether love could grow like tomatoes. The three of them didn't become perfect. There were hard days, there were awkward dinners, unfinished conversations, and moments of doubt. But there was also growth, honesty, grace, and love that didn't demand attention but earned it. Eventually, Nolan did propose. On a quiet afternoon, in the garden Miles had helped build, with dirt still on his jeans and Avery's favorite flowers in his hand. She said yes. Miles was the first to yell, "Finally," and the second later, "Can I be the best man?" At the wedding, Susie sat in the front row, dressed in pale lavender and holding back tears she never imagined shedding for a woman she once doubted. She toasted to new beginnings, the best kind of surprises, and strong women who love even stronger. They built a life together, not perfect, not easy, but real. And sometimes when the night was quiet, Avery would sit in the yard with Miles, looking up at the stars, and he would tell her about his mom. And Avery would listen, hold his hand, and remind him what she always did. She's still with you, just like I am. It wasn't the life she planned. It was better. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below.